Hello, everyone, and welcome today to All About Logos. We are thrilled to have you here. I am Beth Brodowski, for those of you that are new to our programming here, and I am the president of Iris Creative. We are a 26-year-old brand strategy, brand identity, brand communications firm that works with nonprofits and government organizations. And we also run classes and programs through our nonprofit toolkit service that has master classes and courses all about nonprofit marketing and communications. It's something that we love and we love to talk about. And I'm thrilled to have you all here today for what is probably my favorite topic to talk about. I love logos. Most likely you guys love logos. And it's such a fun thing to talk about. But as we know, there's a lot of logos. Logos can get really out of control. There's always somebody that says, we need a new logo for this, or we need a new logo for that. And so that'll be very helpful to us, have us talk through this. So when we think about logos, we think about your organizational brand. We think about that main logo that you use and you get things going with. So it's really always helpful to think about your organizational brand as like the starting point of your logo journey, your logo process, or your sort of echelon of logos. And it's easy to think that that may be your logo and your only logo. But if you looked hard, you would probably find logos in other parts of your organization. You might have programs that have their own logo or their own identity or their own color, something. You might have an annual fund or a society or something in your development world that has its own brand identity, own look. You might have an event, a big signature gala or a race, or any type of an event that you might do that over time, or even to launch, had its own logo created that may be similar to your main logo, or it may be something totally different. Your campaigns, all kinds of campaigns. You might have a Giving Day campaign, or an advocacy campaign, or a marketing campaign, sales campaign, advertising campaign, Giving Days. There's so many things that there are campaigns that you might be running that have their own look. You might have had an anniversary, and you all know if you've had an anniversary, someone's going to say, we need an anniversary logo. We're going to talk about those. If you're a school, you might have a team or a mascot on top of all of your regular logos. And surprisingly, you might have a strategic plan that has its own identity. We have done logos to turn a strategic plan into a public-facing document with a kind of an ideation around it that really takes it from strategic plan kind of almost into like, this is our manifesto. This is where we're going. So when we think about logos, we have to think more than just about your individual, your main brand logo. We have to think about all those visual things that you use that someone in your world or someone in the world might be hooking into and connecting with as they know you. But then on top of that, we have to think about how each of these things relates and connects to each other. So how do your logos connect with your main organization's logo? But how do they also connect to each other? And there are actually a lot of different ways that you can approach that. But we have to think about, what do we want it to be? What do we want it to look like? What do we want all of this stuff to add up to when we're talking about our brand identity, which is the word that we in marketing typically use when we're talking about all of our logo. So what makes a good logo? Everybody always talks, oh, that's a good logo, or I don't like that logo. First of all, everyone has opinions about logo. It's always going to happen. You're going to have opinions about logos you see in the world, your own logo, your executive staff, your board members, everyone's going to have an opinion about a logo. And so if you're here today, because you're at a stage where you're evaluating your logo or your logos and where you need to go next, you're going to be facing a lot of opinions when it comes to logos. And so it's really important to begin to educate yourself, and so that you can then guide your community through giving you feedback and giving you opinions, but that are based in a language that is helpful. Most people don't understand designer language, and designers don't always understand people language or corporate language or business language. And so a lot of times when we're working through these things, we don't always know the words that we're talking about. And so good is really a relative term. We're going to talk about why, because there's all different kinds of logos. So when you look at these logos over here, believe it or not, they're all different structures from what a designer might talk about. So the Facebook logo is mostly just text. It's typography. Facebook, those letters that you see there is a custom font just for Facebook. We're actually doing a project with Yale right now, and Yale has created their own font called Yale. And so just because something just looks like letters and just looks like it's typed on the page doesn't mean that that's actually what it is. There may be a tremendous amount of customization that makes those letters look just so that even that when it's just white letters on a blue background, it has a look to it. It holds together and it looks like a graphical element. You might have a logo like Starbucks logo, and look at their current logo. Over time, they now just have the mermaid. It's just an icon, just a graphic, just an image. If you look at the Nike logo, they've got the old swoosh. Sometimes the word Nike is with it, sometimes it's not. Well, those logos have been around a long time, and they have had billions of dollars put into marketing it. So is the Nike logo a good logo? I don't know. That's okay. But really what makes it a good logo for Nike and a great logo for marketing is the association that we all have put behind it. So it's so funny, there's an old story. This is actually true, that a student or a very young person did the logo for Nike. And I don't know exactly how much she got paid for it. Urban legend says she got paid $50 for that logo. And in the design community, there's outrage around the fact of there's this logo that now makes this company billions and billions of dollars, and she only got paid $50. Well, actually, no. There's on the internet, if you research, turns out they eventually gave her some stock. So she probably did just fine from that. But as a designer myself, we think logos are really important. But the question is it the logo in and of itself, or is it the marketing that's wrapped around that logo that makes people associate that image with that idea, with that work product, with that effort, with that mission? It's probably a little bit of everything, right? There's all these different things. If you look at the Olympic rings, we all recognize them. They're simple, they're clean, they're graphic. It's a great logo, but why? So there's lots of different structures you can use. You can go with imagery, you could go with typography, you can go with a combination of imagery and typography like Habitat for Humanity does, or you could go with something that we would call an emblem logo or a shield logo, where every element is enclosed within a space. That's what Salvation Army does. All of them can be good logos. All of them can be bad logos. It all depends. So you have to figure out what makes a good logo for you. And so here are 5 things that I think that you can consider as you're here today, probably because you're thinking about logos. So a good logo is something that represents who you are today. A lot of times people are coming to the idea of changing their logo because they've grown, they've evolved. Maybe you do more things. Maybe even your name doesn't really work for you anymore. And you've got to change. If you're changing your name, you've got to start changing everything. So does your logo represent who you are today and where you're going? Does your logo position you well against your competitors? We've once did a logo for somebody that when they started, they were the only game in town. They were the only people dealing with this. I'm actually going to show you that logo later. So it didn't, in theory, you could say it didn't really matter what they looked like. Maybe yes, maybe no, but without significant competitors, without people pressing up against you and vying for the dollars that you're trying to get, maybe the logo isn't as important, and whether it's current or appropriate or exactly right. But as you begin to get competitors, as people are choosing, do we do this activity with you? Do we give you this event, this money, this student, this member, this donor dollar, or do I do something else? Then how your position, how your logo sits, and that doesn't necessarily mean better or worse. That might mean, are you too similar to somebody else? Are you too different from somebody else? Do you look like you belong in the category with the other people that you should be belonging with? Or do you look like you're completely, out in left field doing something totally different? Is that right for you? Is that wrong for you? It's all subjective. Is your logo attracting exactly the right people? Is attracting exactly the right people? Because everything is about your audience. And what happens a lot of times is that people want everyone. And that's lovely to want everyone. Of course, we're always going to want everyone, but you need to make sure that you're aiming for someone. Someone is different than everyone. If you're not perfect for someone, then you're going to be totally mediocre for an awful lot of people. So you need to really figure out who your audience is. And we like to use the term, who do you need to thrive? Who do you need to love you? Sign up for your stuff, pay attention, do different things so that you can attract the right people. Does it help those people? Does it help those exactly right people remember and understand you? So is the visual that you're using to connect people, is it hooking them in and helping build recall? Aha, yes, I've seen that image before. I remember it, but not just like that's cute, but I have no idea what they do. Is it actually helping people get to know you, understand you, feel associated and connected with you? Is it building your community, or is it just a thing that you're using because it exists? And last, this is the term, like this is all like external things, but internally, is your logo easy to use in all the ways that are needed? Over the last decade, one of the huge things that's changed when it comes to logos is that we need to use logos on social media. And most social media profiles require a square or a circle shape. And for people that have long, wide logos or narrow, tall logos or triangle logos or crazy shape things, all of a sudden that became a huge problem. Or maybe your logo has been around so long, I've seen this happen too, that you don't have an original or a native file for it. And when you need to blow it up big to be on a banner at your gala, the quality just falls apart because it's grainy or pixelated, or you don't have the original that you can do that with. Maybe you have a JPEG file and there's that white box on the background and you have no idea how to get rid of it and get it away because that's the only file. Maybe you need to use that logo in long, skinny, wide spaces, and you only have a square logo. So these are the things to start to think about. Like when you're using that logo in your marketing on your day-to-day basis, where do you hit roadblocks? And are those roadblocks enough for it to be time to start thinking about change? So there's five sort of key things that you can consider when you're thinking about, like, even though there may be a contingent of people that love your logo, is this logo really good? Is it really getting you to where you need to be for your future? Does that make sense? I hope it does. So now we're going to talk about those different things. I just showed you that whole spectrum of all these different types of logos. I'm going to give you some examples of that, of what those different types of logos might mean and might look like at your organization. So organizational brand is typically what we would think of as our primary logo, your main logo. It typically includes maybe some imagery. It might include some graphics. And it's what you use in a primary setting. It's probably what's on your website. You might have subordinate or secondary versions of your logo. I'm going to show you some of those later. But most organizations have a core main logo that they use to show who they are to the world. You might have programs. This is an organization that has a lot of programs, a lot of programs. And I'll show you their original, their original logo will come up later. But we came in and did this logo for them on the left. as an update. We didn't make huge changes. We just did a minor update to their logo because they recognize that they have a lot of different programs. And at the time we did this logo, they were feeling like, wow, these programs have a big, strong identity, but our organization doesn't necessarily. People don't know that they're associated with us. And that's an important thing for you all to consider. This is where we're starting to get into what we would call logo hierarchy. Logo hierarchy, which means that relationship of your logos to each other. This type of a structure is what we would call an individualistic hierarchy. It means that each brand, each sub-brand within your main brand is doing its own thing. You can equate this in the commercial market world. Could equate this to like a company like Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble has products like toothpaste and laundry soap. And when you go to the grocery store and you buy a bottle of Tide, Procter & Gamble has decided that it does not matter to them that you know that Procter & Gamble is who makes Tide. It matters to them that you love Tide, you buy Tide, and you go into the store and look for that orange bottle. And you walk down that aisle, grab the bottle of Tide without thinking about it, put it in your cart and keep going without looking at any of the other options that are on the shelf. And then they have Colgate, which has a completely different color scheme. Everything is different. Individualistic brand. There's no wrong way, there's no right way. There's a matter of what is right for you. So in this brand, what you're very likely to get in this type of a structure is people very much identifying with the individual programs. Sometimes that might mean at a loss for knowing your main top brand. Now, if you contrast that to a completely different way of doing program brands, you can look at what universities are doing. Most universities reached the point where they believed that they were stronger with what we would call a master brand, a very, very tight, narrow brand look that puts the main brand, the organizational brand, that primary brand at the top of the architecture and makes everything else very, very subordinate to that. Most often this is done with typography. You can see what the University of Pennsylvania does. They have their PEN logo, which is their acronym. People call them, I'm from Philadelphia, everybody calls them PEN. And then they have their sub-brands. Now, some sub-brands 100% identical, no variations, no changing. What you see Penn's doing here is they keep their shield on everything, and then they've got a little bit of variation even in their sub-branding. But if you look at this, now I'm going to go back to the other slide. If you compare this structure and style of branding, lots of different colors, different typographies, different imagery. With this, you can just see how much tighter it is. And they've decided that this is the appropriate way to go. This is a master brand structure versus an individualistic structure. Another type of thing you might need a logo for, we talked about campaigns. So there's Giving Day campaigns, there's capital campaigns, there's advocacy campaigns, there's sort of issue awareness campaigns. And so this is for an organization called the Harley School. Later, I'm going to show you all of their logos. And they wanted a logo for an online giving day. And so sometimes when you're doing an online event, you want something that's really going to capture eyeballs, capture notice. And so the colors that are used within this, the green is their primary organizational color, but the color scheme that we picked, each of their schools and programs within their whole independent school arena, these are all the colors. So they have a whole color palette that existed that their community is used to seeing. And we wanted to represent all of the different programs. So in this case, we did it with color. They also, in their main logo, it's a shield with an oak leaf and an acorn in it. And so we wanted to use imagery and colors from their main logo, but create something totally new and unique and different that maybe went a little bit further away. A lot of the times when we talk about brand hierarchy, we talk about things like, do you want things to be siblings, cousins, or distant relations? And this is a great way to think about that when you're thinking about your brand architecture. How do you want do you want your logos to be like siblings, like the Penn logo? Do you want them to be more distant cousins, like what the Perinatal Cooperative is doing? Here's another campaign. This is also for a giving. This was a giving week that was done. And so in this case, this is Smith Memorial Playground. And I show you here, this is their primary logo here over on the left. And we created the Play It Forward logo. And what we decided to do was we wanted to, it's a playground. So it's youthful, it's fun, and it's an online campaign, which is fun, engaging, and visual. And so we decided to move away from the typography that Smith uses for their logo, pick a new typography, a new type style, make that like a new logo, but we kept the color palette. And you can see that even the tagline of the campaign is the same. It is the same font as Smith Memorial Playground. You might not necessarily be able to know that, but we kept that the same. So when you're thinking about your logo system, you have to think about, how are we going to vary things? What do we keep the same and what do we keep different? And how many steps away from the original can I move before it's so far away that it doesn't associate anymore, that you don't recognize this as part of that same system? And so these are things, and there's no one right way to do it. I wish I could say, well, if you just keep this the same, everything's going to be fine. But, it's a creative process. So sometimes, if in some cases, changing it to this font might be like, well, I don't recognize it as them anymore. But so for example, if the Smith logo was navy blue, and I changed the font, but also made it navy blue, there's an awful lot of navy blue things in the world. But because Smith uses this fairly distinctive color combination in their logo, being able to use that color combination in conjunction with Smith's other iconography allowed it to stay the same. And we were even able to create this new see the little heart twist that's on the end of the typography. We created that, and then we used that heart as a thermometer throughout the campaign. So then we did things with our graphics as we built out this sub brand to keep the graphics within this box. So, we've got the box to Play It Forward. What's the graphics? And you can see it's a little bit softer, a little curvier than the graphics that are within the main Smith logo. But you have to think about that, because it's not always the right answer. You may also have events. So I love events. The number one thing people usually ask me about logos is, does our event have to be the same? And if you're a navy blue organization, sometimes it's really boring to have to do a navy blue event. We did that for an organization once that was a very navy blue organization, and they were having a spring event. And I remember that the event chair wanted everything to be pink and Kelly green. And in my personal opinion, by the time the piece was lovely, it was very pretty, but it didn't look remotely connected to the main organization, because it went too many steps away and really lost what made this organization themselves. In this case, this is an organization that I thought was interesting what they chose to do. We did this invitation, but we did not create this logo system. So the Philadelphia Education Fund, that in the blue box in this design, that's the organization's logo. And so what they decided to do was, for their awards, they tacked a logo onto the logo. And sometimes we call that putting a hat on a hat, or I have another friend that calls it putting a bird on it. More is more doesn't always create the best design, right? It doesn't always create the best outcomes. But in this case, it worked because their logo was very simple and very structured, and they have a little star in it. They then use stars as their iconography and as their theme for a lot of the things. As you can see, in this case, we used sort of a subtle twist on the Starry, Starry Night graphical look in the background, and everything is about stars. And so then every year what they do, this is obviously from a long time ago, but every year they just update the year in their awards design, and that way they can save their energy to make the graphic. They make each invitation theme. They don't have to change the theme of their logo. And that's one approach to events. Some events have a different logo for the event every year. Some logos have the same, don't even have an event logo, and some keep a logo like this and then change out the design, the graphics around it. But this may be true for your gala. You might have races, awards, trade shows, conferences. Think about how they integrate with your main logo. Some people like their events to be totally standalone. Some people like their events to be very visually aligned. You need to start with some strategic conversations in your organization about where this needs to sit in your brand. You might have some development projects, some fundraising projects that have their own stuff already or might benefit from something of its own. So this conversation is a little bit about, what do you have right now and how is everything that you have adding up to be more than the sum of its parts? I'm hoping that what you also might get as a takeaway from this conversation is, where are there places in our organization that a logo might be a benefit? That if we added in some branding, some sub-branding, some identity, we could expand people's visual connection to us and give ourselves a few more hooks to make people remember, recall, and become attached. So in this case, this is a logo that we developed for that Harley School. Remember the acorn that I showed you a few minutes ago? So acorns, oak leaves, all of that stuff. So for their fund, we decided to create an oak tree that has leaves blowing off of the oak tree, because the fund is the annual fund, and that those are the leaves that spread out and fund things throughout the whole year. That's sort of the meaning behind this logo, that it comes off of the tree and it integrates into our system, and you see it happening all year long. And because it's this annual fund, annual money concept, what they decided they wanted to do was to take that logo and create variations on it for every season, so it could be a little bit different. Now, I can tell you, this is not always a great idea. Not everyone is Google, that you can log in and see a Google Doodle and still be able to know for sure that you've landed on Google. So you have to really think about, if you're creating a brand new logo and creating variations on it, do you have enough pre-buy-in from your audience that you can get them attached to that primary logo and the variations all at once? They believed that they could, so they went this direction. Anniversary logos. I don't know if any of you have had an anniversary, but people love anniversaries. They love celebrating anniversaries. They love doing logos for anniversaries. Sometimes this is a great idea. Sometimes, I don't know, you guys can tell me. Has it ever just been like a lot of busy work? Anybody that's ever done this, do you ever feel like you spent like 4 months putting new logos onto things and then 4 months taking that logo back off of things? Sometimes it can feel like that you just put on a logo and change things up to celebrate the anniversary, to make somebody who thinks it's great that we have an anniversary happy, and then you unwind it. I'm kind of a believer that if you're going to go to the effort of creating an anniversary logo, there should be a reason. There should be more than this. There should be more that you're trying to tell people and show people than just, hey, we've been here for 50 years. So I would encourage you, if you're considering an anniversary celebration, think about how it's more than just a work product of on again, off again logos. And also think about what anniversaries are really worth celebrating. If you have, like, we do a lot of work for this, this over here on the bottom right, you'll see the Delaware Hospice. That's a logo that we created. We didn't do the other ones, but we did put that banner under the New Hope logo. So they had a 40th anniversary, but you can see they have a program that just recently had a 30th anniversary. So I would encourage you to be thoughtful in what's worth celebrating, who's the audience for it, and is it going to ever seem like, here's another, they had an anniversary 3 years or 5 years ago, there's an anniversary, here's an anniversary, you get an anniversary, you get an anniversary. It can feel like a lot to your audience, and at some point it can feel very much like the Google Doodle. Here's a different logo, here's a different logo, and you can degrade people's attachment to your primary logo if they don't see it for a year. So you have to think about, how much equity do you have in your primary logo? Can your brand sustain a change? Or would you rather do something like, see what RHD did over here? They have their primary logo and they added to it versus changing it completely. Like Chestnut Hill College changed out their shield almost 100%. They kept their color and they kept their logo and they kept the feeling of the shape in a shield. So these are things you have to think about when you're doing your logo. Are you doing a totally new logo? Are you doing a little bit of a change? Are you adding, or are you just like sticking a banner underneath of it and calling it a day? There's lots of different ways to approach an anniversary, but the biggest advice I would give you is think cautiously about what the impact of that change is going to do on your brand. Teams and mascots. Now, I know that many of you here probably are not from schools, but lots of you are. And so teams and mascots, for people that have them, bring a whole different level. Like, is your mascot your logo? Is it not your logo? This is one that we just did for a school here in Pennsylvania called Unionville School District. And they went through a massive change. They had iconography that the students there did not find socially acceptable anymore. And so they reached a point that they had to change even when they weren't actually financially or strategically really ready for it because of the drive of the students. And so we had to do a wholesale change. We had to change their mascot, but we also had to change like what was going to be on their business cards. We had to think about all of that stuff. So in this case, we have a primary logo for the sports side of the organization, but on the right hand, you see this is the business logo. Is it primary? Is it secondary? In the business side, it's their primary logo, but it's not the main logo that we use. So in addition to, you have to think about how are you using these things? This big logo that's graphical looks amazing on kids' t-shirts, but it doesn't work as well on a business card. So even when you're thinking about your primary logo, you might have to also think about the variations you need for the different uses. Are you putting it, on a scoreboard? Are you putting it on a business card? Are you putting it on billboards? Are you putting it in a square social media avatar? Are you putting it vertically on banners on your campus? What do you need? Here's another one that's another example of that. Now, these two decided that they didn't need different shapes, but this BlackRock logo, they decided that they wanted a chess piece for their mascot, which is hilarious and extremely appropriate for this school. It's a middle school, so it's a pawn that's growing up to want to be a queen or a king. So that's why we did this logo. But they thought that's going to be way too complicated. And the challenge with a pawn is that it's a very vertical object and typography is usually a very horizontal object. So putting those two things together visually just really doesn't work. So in this case, what we did was we pulled one element out of the logo and used that for the cleaner, simpler business design. So I've showed you can change by color, you can change by typography, you can vary elements that are in it. There's lots of different ways that you can create your sub-brands. So now we're starting to talk about how do you put all of this back into a logo system? And if you're here, I should have probably said up front, if you have questions, so I went through a lot of the key things. I'm kind of wrapping up here and getting into the end where you might have some questions. So if you have any thoughts on anything I'm showing you, if you have any questions for me, jump in now. I just want to check my little button here because sometimes the questions is turned off. And yes, you guys, everyone can chat with everyone. So feel free to pop stuff into chat. If you have questions for me, if you have comments for each other, or feel free to answer each other's questions as we kind of wrap this up and start to move into the Q&A period here. So I talked about this Harley School. So now you can see all of their elements put together. This is their main logo, which is a shield that existed before we came. And then we built them out. This Heart of Harley Giving Day campaign logo. This is another campaign that I didn't show you. It's a Thankful campaign logo, and then their fund logo. And you can see this is kind of somewhere in between the individual brand and the master brand. We would call this an associated brand, because they use different typography, but they keep the same color scheme and they're not using the same graphic, but they're using related graphics. They're all about oak trees, oak leaves, acorns. So it's all in a family of iconography, but it's wider than that tight master brand that Penn uses, but narrower than the individualistic brand that the Perinatal Cooperative uses. So I've showed you all of these different things, lots of different ways to approach it. But I'm hoping what you also see is that even when you have just an organizational logo, it's not just an organizational logo. You might have a vertical format. You might have a horizontal format. You might have a square format. You might have white, black, purple, green. You might have a lot of different things. And you need to both keep track of what you've got, map out where you use what when, and make sure that you have something that's intact so that, maybe you win the lottery and you're not in your job anymore. You want to have organizational integrity, which doesn't mean personal integrity, but kind of that too. You want to have the personal integrity to make sure that you're leaving a solid, followable brand. Oh God, I'm not saying that right. A solid brand that your next person can follow. There you go. That's a little better. So a style guide is a key element to that. So you want to map out what are all the versions that are the logo and which one's the primary logo. What does primary logo mean to you? Where do you use a primary logo? Where do you use an alternate logo? How much space needs to be around the logo? This is a little bit of a like designer nerdiness thing that I'm not sure that anyone pays attention to, but give your logo some breathing room. All the ways that you shouldn't mess with the logo. We call this the don't taunt the logo page. Don't stretch it, don't pull it, don't change the font, don't change the color, don't twist it, twirl it, rock it, bop it, all that stuff. Don't mess with the logo. The logo is there for a reason. What are the primary colors? Now, you would not think that this was a big deal to be able to list out what are the colors and list them out in as many ways as possible. List them out in, if you're using full color printing, that's CMYK. I'm going to actually, in February, I'm teaching a whole class on color where we will get much more into color, RGB and hex. So I'm not going to go into detail with it now. But it's so easy for somebody to say, oh, I'm getting t-shirts and they don't have a t-shirt in that color. So I'm going to change, or they don't have ink in that color. So I'm going to change it. And it's really easy for your color to migrate off of its main color. So document down, what is your main color? What are your fonts? All of those different things. So I'm going to pop over here. We've got a little bit of a question. So Courtney's asking, with this example, there are multiple typography with the imagery. How many type styles do you recommend using overall, or does it depend on the campaign and how you're using? Oh, Courtney, I really wish I could say that there was like a rule for that. In general, though, I would say, so I just showed you, in fact, I did not have the page of typography for the creative brief, but in your creative brief, excuse me, not creative brief, your style guide, I'm looking at the wrong page here. In your style guide, there should be a page that says, here are our fonts. At a core level, I believe that an organization should have 2 to 3 fonts. You should have the font that you use for your body copy. You should have the font that you use for things like headlines, and maybe even list out the font that you use in your logo. Now, the font that you use in your logo may not be the font that you use in your graphic design. Sometimes we pick a font for the logo. Let me just go back here so that you can see this. Look at this font. This is a pretty wonky font, right? The Del Art. Now you can see what we did was we started with the font that says Delaware Art Museum. And we took it, and Megan, did her design wizardry with it, and she modified it and customized it and made a ton of changes. In fact, the E that's in the Del is actually the W turned on its side and then modified further. So we did a massive amount of customization, even though it looks like it's a type logo. Trust me, that's an illustration. But even the Delaware Art Museum logo, it's a weird font. So we're actually only using it in the logo. They don't use it anywhere in their actual marketing copy. Still, you want to have a record of what that font is. And don't ask me what it is because I don't remember. Megan might remember, and she can pop it in if you care. So you want to have all of that documented, and you want to be able to say, hey, this is a super cool font that you might fall in love with, but do not use this. We don't use this for headlines. But you might also have a special thing. So this is where you get out of headlines and body copy and maybe captions, little things like that. That's where it starts to get gray area. Do you want to have one, we would call it a fancy font or a display font or a highlight font that's like, we're going to like the example that I showed you for Smith Playground. That's our fancy font. Or your brand might be wide enough that you can say, you know what? Headlines are this, body copy is this. But when it comes to like fancy things or new logos, you can do whatever you want. My advice would be is if that's the way you decide to map out your brand where you can use different fonts, you need to make sure that you're keeping enough of the other things together. Like I wouldn't have used that different font that I used on Harley School and then maybe used it in one of those subcolors, like that turquoise color that was in there. We made sure that the font was in their green because we're already moving a few steps away with the script font. So we want to bring it back to center with the color. So Courtney, I hope that answers the question. And Anthony, I'm going to come back to you. I'm just going to make sure I circle through these last couple of slides. So creative brief. So if you're thinking about doing a new logo, you need to really get your thoughts out of your head. Now, you may work with an outside designer who has a creative brief process to extract those thoughts out of your head. If you're doing it in-house, or if you've decided to, get somebody's nephew to do it for you, you might need to guide them along because trust me, graphic designers and business people don't always use the same language. I cannot tell you the amount of times that somebody told me, well, we want our logo to be modern. Well, what does modern mean? Does modern mean SpaceX? Or does modern mean IKEA? Or does modern mean Simple Living magazine? Like, what does modern mean to you? And you've got to dig and dig and dig so that you really make sure that whatever word you said means to you, that your designer understands what you're talking about. And so going through some question and answer, like what imagery should we be looking for? Is there any imagery? Like maybe you're a medical organization, and if you see that caduceus one more time, you're going to want to poke your eyes out. No caduceus, I don't know what the plural is of that. But you may have things that you just, like your organization's like, oh, this is not us, we don't like it. Or there may be things that an outside designer that does not know your sector or your industry would never know. Would never know. We are not the organization that uses this. Or like, what do your competitors use? So thinking about these things, like, are you looking for a literal illustration of what you do? Are you open to the idea of something symbolic or abstract? How would you describe your brand personality? These are some great questions to begin to ask yourself. So another big question that we get asked a lot is, when is it time to change? Like, has all of this added up to enough that it's really worth the change? So I'm going to give you a couple of here's a couple of barometer points that you can use to help yourselves. And maybe you've decided it's time for change, but you could use these with the people that you have to convince that it's time to change. So sometimes it's time to change when you need to telegraph change. So the Delaware Art Museum logo that was on the left is not a bad logo. That's a cool logo. It's kind of nice. It's a little dated looking, but if you take some of the elements and we could have just made a little modification to it. We could have, but we had just done a year-long rebranding strategy project, really deep strategy project. And we were changing, they had a new strategic plan. And the point of the rebrand was to remap the brand to this new strategic direction. And what happens a lot is people write a new strategic plan and then they just keep on doing their marketing the way they're doing their marketing. If you don't repoint that to the new North Star, you're going to have a strategic plan on one side of your organization and marketing on the other side of the organization. And 3 years from now, when you look to see how well you did on your strategic plan, you're going to wonder why you didn't make the progress that you made. So we did the work to connect. We always say that branding builds the bridge between your mission and your marketing. So we had to map out what's our position, all of these things that were like, this is who we want to be going into the future. While there was nothing really wrong with this logo that would have prevented that from happening, we thought changing the logo is a great way for us to telegraph this change, to message things are different here. When is it time to change? Leveling up to be competitive. Have you ever had that feeling that like you're maybe some of you are in development and you're going out to talk to a big donor, and all you can think of is, I can't believe I have to like put this in front of my big donor. I can't believe this is what we look like. Kind of like, I can't believe I showed up in sweatpants to talk to Mackenzie Scott. People sometimes have that feeling that like, We're no longer, like, we started here because we haven't changed and evolved. We're no longer on the same shelf with other people that are asking our people for money, or other schools that our students might want to go to, or other organizations that our people might be a membership to. If you're feeling like you're getting too far away from what's current, granted, this isn't just a visual project, but there's a visual component to it. If you don't look like you belong where you need to and want to belong, it's going to start to impact you. And maybe your content is just dated and uninspiring. So this is the example that I mentioned before, where on the left, when they started, they were the only game in town. This is an organization that supports a rare disease. And so they were the only people doing it. But 21 years later, they had competitors. And so we helped them reimagine their name, which renaming doesn't always mean a massive change. Sometimes it means a little change. We helped them create a tagline. We did all this research, and then they came up with this new look. And this is actually 12 years old now. So it's amazing to see an organization that when you really rethink something thoroughly, they've been able to spin this out to sub brands on their own because they got such clear direction of where they needed to be at the top level. And then this is the Perinatal Cooperative again. When we redid this logo a number of years ago, the logo on the left is what they were working with. And as you can see, they didn't, like we said, they didn't have a good file. Like every time they were trying to use their logo, they were using a JPEG. And so it was corrupted. It was low quality. It was designed in a way that wasn't of the current level of design that existed in the world. And on top of it, their design was a triangle, which is the hardest shape to work with from a design perspective. So we redesigned it, and as you can see, we used blue. If you remember back to their original, all of their different sub brands, while they're all different, an awful lot of them use blue. And so we brought the blue in to help build some harmony and some recognition so that they could use this logo with their other logos and build up some corporate presence. You also may be in a process of realigning. So in this case, this organization, they had two divisions, but everyone was really confused about what was one division and what the other was the other division. They were confused internally. Their audience was confused externally. So we created a new master brand and then created these so the one on the right is actually the master brand, and the one on the left is actually their sub brand. So there's lots of different ways that you can approach it. Oh, and the last way, I think this is the last way. Evolution or revolution. So this isn't a reason to change, but you want to think about the impact of change. When you're going in to change a logo, change doesn't necessarily have to mean throwing out everything and starting over again. You can evolve. So if you look on the left here with Starbucks, the first time they redid their logo, would you call that an evolution or a revolution? They still use that mermaid in the center. So the way I look at it, ever since day one, Starbucks has been slowly evolving their logo, one step at a time, a number of years at a time. They just moved and moved and moved, but they're still connected to their original logo and their original iconography that they used. Versus on the right here, Animal Planet did a revolution. They completely dropped the color. They dropped the typography. They added an icon. They were a type-based logo. Now they're an image plus type-based logo. They changed every single thing about their logo. However, Animal Planet has a television channel where they can put their logo on and get everybody to see it every single day that they watch that. So they have a great platform in order to support their revolution, where other people without the attachment, without the viewer base, might need to go a little slower. So coming back to this, those 5 things that we talked about in the beginning, 5 questions that you want to ask yourself every 5 years. And this means I really think that you should ask yourself these things to evaluate where you are with your logo, evaluate whether change is needed, evaluate, are you too dated? Do you need to telegraph change? Or do people understand who you are? Do your logos represent who you are today? Position you well against your competitors? Attract the right people? Help people remember and understand you? And are they easy to use in all the ways that are needed? So I'm going to come back to these. I got a couple of questions popping in here. So we've got, of course, I'm going a little bit late, but I promise we'll be done by 3. So resources and tools for you. I talk about logos a lot. I talk about branding a lot. If these are things that you want to hear more of, Over on our service center called Nonprofit Toolkit, we do classes and programs for people all the time, every month on branding. Last year, we did a whole course on the elements of branding. We have individual classes on branding, things on Lowe's, all kinds of different things. But classes like this, we call these community webinars, these things that have no cost. We are putting all of these free things up into the member area of Nonprofit Toolkit. And you can go to Nonprofit Toolkit and create a login, like sign up to create a login, join our list, and you will get access to these free things without ever buying anything. So that's just some free tools that you can get. And we're going to be doing a lot more of these this year than we did last year. Some of them are going to be presentations like this. Some of them are going to be interviews. In fact, in March, we're going to do an interview on toolkits and giving days and building participation in a community. We're also going to send you this little shortcut logo design worksheet. You know, our creative brief process is pretty long and intense. And if an intense process is what you're looking for, give me a call. I'll be happy to talk to you a little bit about how we work a logo brand identity process and how we help people think about brand hierarchy. But if this is something you need to do yourselves, this is just a little 2-pager that we're going to send you so that you have some tools to do it on your own. Sure. Let me go back. Okay. So while I answer these questions, I'm going back to the 5 questions. There you go. You can screenshot that if you want to. So I'm going to leave it here and go into questions. So Anthony's asking, when it comes to nonprofit logos, what are some tips to integrate the rebranded imagery? Anthony, I think I need a little bit more of a clarification. Are you saying, how do you begin to take that new logo and build it out into your marketing? If that's your question, I can tell you I have an entire other class on that. And I can take that class and I can put it up into the free member series. We have a class called like about managing your brand. How do you take that new logo and bring it out into the world? We also in our, if it's at all helpful to you, last year we taught in our branding course, we taught a class about doing a communication audit. And so if you're thinking about doing a rebrand of any sort, I highly recommend doing a communication audit so that you understand, if I change this thing, what is my next year going to look like? In my experience, it typically can take 18 months to get everything turned over. Like you might be able to take your logo and put it up onto your website. Oh, it's going to be about the same shape and size. We can just stick it up on the website. Everything will be fine. But if you change your logo, every single thing that you touch for the next year is going to have to need that new logo. And maybe more than a new logo, maybe in addition to a new logo, you're building out a new look. And in fact, I'll make sure Megan has another community webinar that we did it was called From a Logo to a Look. So Anthony, that might be helpful. I'll make sure Megan puts it up into the community area. And we have a program with one of our clients called From a Logo to a Look, where we talked about, they actually had a new logo and we helped them take that logo and bring it into their brand. Okay, so Laura is working at a pre-K to 12 school, and our school does not stick to our fonts. Oh, this is typical for brands and other schools to have is this typical for brands or other schools to have clothing and accessories that have different logos and graphic designs? We are having trouble trying to create a brand consistency in our school store. So, Megan, thank you so much. So, Laura, you're asking me actually 2 things. Is this typical? Yes, it is typical. Is it because that's what people do? It's not typical because that's what people should do. But every school is different. Every situation is different. As if you work in a pre-K through 12 school, I am sure you're well aware of the fiefdoms that happen within that and people's ownership that they get attached to their stuff. And they don't want you people in administration messing with it a lot of the time. So I recommend in your situation, if you really want to start, narrowing things down, tightening things up, I would recommend starting by getting buy-in for that process from your head of school and your board. If you do not have if you don't have whoever's in power, if you don't have the most powerful people's support in this, you're gonna be banging your head against a wall. You're gonna be trying to make change and bring things into professionalism and brand consistency, and people are gonna go rogue, and you're gonna like show up at an event and be like, where did that t-shirt come from? But if you can get buy-in and support for the reasons behind this, then you can make a lot of progress with it. I would recommend, Laura, that you watch the this one, Creating Enthusiasm for Your New Brand. That is a talk that we did. I brought Krista Fazio, who is the internal communications director at Unionville High School. And she talks all about, I'm just interviewing her. She just talks all about how she got people on board and excited and interested in moving forward with this process. And the thing is, Laura, you don't necessarily have to rebrand. In our case, we actually don't even like the word rebrand. I call it brand focus, because brand focus means we're taking what we've got and we're looking at it and we're examining it and we're figuring out what of what we have serves us now and will serve us getting to the future that we all want, and where we need to tighten things up and narrow our world so that people recognize us for the strengths that we have and know who we are. And so Krista talks a lot about this. This is a specific one for schools. If that's you, I highly recommend that one. So, okay, so Megan's put in a couple of great links to things. There you go. Thank you, Megan. I really appreciate that. Does anyone else has any other questions? I don't want to keep you any longer. I always run a few minutes over because I have so many things I want to say to you all. So I think that may be all the questions. Whoops, I went too far. Questions that we have here. So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that this has been helpful. I hope you've learned some sort of nice baseline stuff around developing your logos. Please feel free to email me if you have any sort of further questions that you feel like, oh, I don't really want to ask this publicly. I'm more than happy to answer your questions in email. And if this is a project that you think that having some outside perspective could be beneficial on, I'm more than happy to set up a call with you so we can talk a little bit about, like, what does it take to do that? What does it look like? And I can, just nothing else, just give you some advice on your approach and, whether working with somebody like us will be helpful, or if you have to go a different path, I can maybe point you in the right direction. So happy to help. I'm so thrilled that you all were here today. I really appreciate you joining us. I love to share these things. And if you have other things that you're working on that you could use a discussion or an interview or any kind of community webinar that would help you move forward in your jobs, that's what we're here for. We want to help you feel confident and feel like total pros and like you got this. So let us know what you need and we'll figure out a way to come up with something for you. Thanks all for joining us today. It's been my pleasure. I look forward to connecting with all of you, and find me on LinkedIn. I love to meet with people over there. Talk to you later and have a wonderful day.